Station gang, and welcome back to Surrounded by Shortboxes with your boy Stu from Dr. Doom's fan club. This show is a spotlight on the history behind some of my favorite back issues from the collection and what I love about them so much. Now, our very first episode, our inaugural debut, featured an Alan Moore and Rick Veitch collaboration from Swamp Thing, a true blue classic with issue number 56, My Blue Heaven, from Moore's incredible, revelatory time writing the Avatar of the Green. Well, today we are highlighting another comic book from that same creative team with a bit of a deeper cut and more of a hidden gem, as this time Swamp Thing shares the stage with Superman and DC Comics presents number 85, aka The Jungle Line, from June 1985. This issue is one of the better one-shot comics or self-contained stories that I have ever read, and without a doubt an all-timer when it comes to Man of Steel stories for me. Let's get into what I love about this issue so much. So first off, how did we get here? As a British writer in the 1970s, Alan Moore had made his name across the pond after abandoning his office job and taking a leap of faith and betting on himself. After submitting work to 2000 AD, his talents eventually caught the eye of Alan Grant, himself a prominent British comic book writer who would also later find success overseas with DC Comics, but not with Superman. Grant would go on to write a number of fantastic Batman stories in the early 90s. Many of my personal favorite Dark Knight tales as a kid came from his time with Norm Brayfogle on art. After advising Moore and helping him to edit his work, Grant encourages him to turn in more stories for 2000 AD's Future Shock series. And Alan begins to get published in both 2000 AD and in Doctor Who Weekly. From here, Moore's creative powers begin to grow parallel to the popularity of the comic book scene in Britain, and soon he finds himself with no shortage of work, finding solid and consistent success as a freelance writer in the early 80s, first with the aforementioned 2000 AD on a variety of titles, and then writing for Marvel UK when he takes over the Captain Britain strip with the great Alan Davis on art. However, it was with a magazine called Warrior where Moore would really come into his own as a writer. In Warrior, Moore was given two ongoing strips, both of which debut in their very first issue. He gets Marvel Man and V for Vendetta. Marvel Man would later be retitled Miracle Man to avoid any legal reckoning from the House of Ideas, but it's Moore's resurrection of an old British character that had been loosely based upon Captain Marvel. Moore takes this omniscient, all-powerful being and drops him into the real and everyday world of 1982. Of course, V for Vendetta you probably know. It was a dystopian thriller set in a futuristic 1997 where a fascist government controls all of Britain and they find themselves trying to capture, subdue, and silence this lone anarchist dressed in a Guy Fawkes costume who turns to terrorism to topple the government. V for Vendetta, of course, gained a cult following that culminated with its adaptation and release as a major motion picture starring Natalie Portman, Hugo Weaving, and John Hurt.
Here comes the crescendo!
Moore's work in 2000 AD caught the eye of comic book legend and then DC editor Len Wein. In 1983, Wein hired him to write and hopefully revive Swamp Thing.
The biggest question people ask me is, how could you let him do that to your characters? You know, how don't you hate what he's doing? And people who don't realize that I picked him to do that. I have no problems with it. It's his book now. He's taken it in different places. I really enjoy what he's doing with the book. And as Karen Berger probably attests, as soon as a new script comes in, I demand a copy as soon as she's done reading it, just so I can see what he's doing. I'm fascinated by it.
Much like Daredevil at the time of Frank Miller's arrival, this book was struggling with both sales and poor characterization when Moore was given the reins. But his run on Swamp Thing turned out to be a revolutionary comic. Moore not only deconstructed and reinvented the character top to bottom, but the book was both a critical darling and a commercial success, moving way more units than DC expected. Moore's prose was unlike anything we had seen before. Poetic, lyrical, and the book experiments with composition in every sense of the word. And its storytelling wasn't afraid to speak on the social, political, and environmental issues of the day in profound ways that always stuck with you. And as a British writer telling a story set in the swamps of Louisiana, it gave us this unique, on the outside but looking in point of view from Moore that was free and unfettered from American bias. Swamp Thing would go on to be the comic that greenlit the push to hire more English writers and artists and gave rise to the British invasion in the late 80s into the American comic book game, birthing one of the best eras for comic books and a publishing initiative that changed the game with DC's Vertigo. This formula of doing radical revamps on older, more obscure DC characters would jumpstart this wave, and the American comic book careers of writers like Grant Morrison with Animal Man, Peter Milligan with Shade the Changing Man, and Neil Gaiman with The Sandman. These writers would also have British artists writing Shotgun. Moore himself would bring Stephen Bissette to Swamp Thing after working with him on Miracle Man. Brian Bolland would go on to do amazing work on Killing Joke and Animal Man. Dave McKean teams up with Gaiman on Sandman. And of course, kind of like the crowning moment of the British invasion, Dave Gibbons and Moore would eventually create Watchmen together. But before that legendary landmark book in 1986, Gibbons would first collaborate with Moore on Superman Annual number 11, and I wanted to mention this issue briefly as it is a definite sibling story of sorts to our spotlighted issue today of DC Comics Presents number 85. They were released 2 weeks apart. They are both one-shots, and they both revolve around the Man of Tomorrow laid low by a deadly fungi. So this story was entitled For the Man Who Has Everything, and it revolves around Superman's birthday. And as Batman, Robin, and Wonder Woman gather at the Fortress of Solitude to celebrate, they find Clark incapacitated with a mysterious flower curled tightly around his chest. We soon find out this is a gift from none other than the deadly Mongol, and it's called the Black Mercy. It's a mix of plant and intelligent fungi that symbiotically attaches itself to its victims, feeds off their bio-auras, and telepathically placates them with a very real simulation of their heart's true desire. Superman naturally dreams of a life on an undestroyed planet Krypton, but the cracks in the foundation of his fake reality soon start to show, and eventually, Supes gets by with a little help from his friends, who soon give Mongol a taste of his own medicine. It's pretty dope that in this story, Moore chooses Robin to be the one who saves the day, and since its release, it's become a bona fide Man of Steel classic. It was further immortalized on a phenomenal episode of Justice League Unlimited.
Happy birthday, Kryptonian. I give you oblivion. Burn!
And it was also loosely adapted for an episode of Supergirl.
What the hell happened here?
It's a symbiotic defense. If we pull that thing off by force, it'll kill Kara.
I wanted to mention that story not only because it's famous as one of the best single issues in the Superman canon, but also because it was part of a 3-story collection of Alan Moore Superman stories that led me to first discovering this issue of DC Comics Presents. That collection also included its namesake story, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow. This was illustrated by longtime Superman artist Kurt Swan, and it's both a goodbye and a love letter to the golden age of the Man of Steel before John Byrne would be given the reins to the character. And so if you want to pick up this issue in collected form, look out for that Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow collection. Otherwise, you can find it in single issue form. DC Comics Presents number 85 dropped in the middle of May 1985. Like I said, 2 weeks before his Superman and Black Mercy tale with Dave Gibbons. At the time, Moore was almost 20 issues into his run on Swamp Thing. Chronologically, it's right between 39 and 40 if you want to get real specific with it. He just created the character of John Constantine in Swamp Thing 37 around this same time. Though Rick Veitch didn't always show up on the artistic credits for Swamp Thing, after reading some old Comics Journal interviews with him, he claims he was basically the de facto assistant / fill-in for Stephen Bissette, as Bissette was plagued with consistency issues during the back half of the run, with Veitch eventually doing entire issues on his own, as we covered in the first Surrounded by Shortboxes with Swamp Thing number 56, and he's present in a big way during the time in which Swamp Thing is traveling through space. And Veitch eventually takes over as both writer and artist once Alan Moore leaves the book after issue 64. This issue also features the all-time great Al Williamson on inking duties, an industry legend who has worked on everything from early EC Comics stuff back in the day, to Flash Gordon, to Star Wars, to Marvel. He also helped folks like Bernie Wrightson and Mike Kaluta break into the industry. I mean, dude has done and seen it all. We also have Tatiana Wood on colors, the brilliant colorist who did most all of Moore's Swamp Thing run, amongst so much other acclaimed work. So all in all, we have an incredible artistic team. So we begin, and Moore instantly does something he will continue to do over and over again in this issue: completely subvert our expectations. Based off this awesome Rick Veitch cover, we head into this issue expecting an intense Supes vs. Swampy showdown, but the reality of this tale couldn't be farther from the truth. So we start our story watching a car heading along Interstate 55, and our driver looks a little worse for the wear. He's got a 5 o'clock shadow, he's clammy, he's sweating profusely. We think we know who this is, but we're not 100% sure. And he's suffering from hallucinations, and he's swerving all across the road as he does so. We quickly realize that our driver may be a bit out of the ordinary, as our narrator tells us. The eyes that once watched Quarks at play are sunken and shot with red. Indeed, at the bottom of the page, our driver is revealed to be none other than Superman, and with this great shot of a haggard and delirious Superman, we get a whopper of a revelation, as we are told the man of tomorrow is heading south to die. What? This terrifying, shocking bottom panel is followed up by this gorgeous full-page spread from Veitch with a Scarlet Jungle hallucination of sorts, featuring what looks to be thought beast skeletons or something like that, superimposed upon the hazy horizon. It's one of the best pages of artwork in the book, and features Veitch doing what he does so well throughout this tale, keeping it funky and weirdly spooky. And I just can't get enough of Moore's prose right here. Once he bathed in the heart of the sun, careless of the mile-high geysers of flame that spat at him in frustrated outrage. Now, for his impudence, it cooks him by degrees, with Clark just looking awful as he's driving the car and hallucinating. So after this jarring and unsettling start, our weak and feeble little reader mind is groping out for meaning, for context. How on earth did we get here? And through another hallucinated flashback, we head back in time to get an answer. We are with Clark Kent and Lana Lang, as together they attend a seminar held by Dr. Everett, who has discovered a meteorite that has landed on Earth, still carrying a patch of living alien fungus, which has managed to survive for years as it hurtled through the frigid vacuum of space without being destroyed. While Lana wonders why the Daily Planet couldn't have just sent one of them to cover this boring story, this fungus piques Clark's interest, and he begins to wonder if perhaps it originates from somewhere else, perhaps from Krypton. Lana asks Dr. Everett if this find is really all that special, given that Earth already has an indestructible alien living amongst them for years, Superman. Everett explains that while that may be true, Superman can't be studied in the same manner that this fungus can. And that is what it sets it apart and makes it special. Now, as soon as he begins interacting with this meteorite, Clark begins to get strange visions and immediately begins to feel faint and lightheaded. After being helped outside by Lana, Clark's mental Rolodex is scanning and eventually retrieving the information it's looking for. And I really appreciate how Moore shows some love to Supes' mental prowess here. Not just all physical in this book. As Moore's narrator says, he searched through a memory vast enough to have every conceivable shape of snowflake precisely filed. That's so extra, but I love it. Like any Kryptonian worth his salt, Clark of course references Rem Ol's Almanac of Old Krypton, duh, and identifies it as the bloodmorel, native to the Scarlet Jungle of Krypton. The fact that Moore chose to feature a fungus from the Scarlet Jungle sheds a little bit of light on what a true stand for Superman that Alan Moore truly was. The Scarlet Jungle first debuted in Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, issue 69 from 1963, and it later shows up in a bunch of Superman issues, including Action Comics from around the same time in the early 60s. The Scarlet Jungle has always been a wild and inhospitable area, located in the center of the untamed continent of Lurvan on the planet Krypton, and it was home to many unusual and dangerous creatures like the Thought Beasts, who are territorial dinos who have thought screens on their head, which show you what they're about to do to you. That feels like it's evolution is working against them, right? That idea is just wow. In and around the Scarlet Jungle, there's also perilous locations like the Fire Falls and the Moving Forest. Portions of the jungle were some of the only undiscovered lands on Krypton right before it, well, you know.
Here comes the crescendo.
But if you grew up a 90s Marvel baby like me and weren't into DC so much, when you think Scarlet Jungle, just think Savage Land. No, sorry guys, maybe I didn't enunciate that well. I said Savage Land, just kind of in general. The whole place, not her specifically. Guys, Savage Land. You know what? Fair. In our story, Clark unfortunately learns a little bit too late from Rim-Ul's Almanac of Old Krypton that the bloodmorel is extremely dangerous and fatal to Kryptonians 92% of the time after exposure. It permeates the skin and grows and thrives in the bloodstream. Side effects will include fevers, bouts of incapacitation, hallucinations, and chronic exertion. And as our page turns, we begin to see specific examples of these symptoms taking hold of Clark. He suffers a paper cut at work the next day. He goes to test his invulnerability every 10 minutes by sticking his hand under a hot faucet until finally, after an hour, his power returns and the pain disappears. I love how Moore and Veitch illustrate the chaos and confusion of his powers working and then not working. After lunch, we see Clark accidentally walk in on two co-workers making out in an empty room at the Daily Planet, with his super hearing not warning him at all as he performs this awkward ambush of sorts. He considers flying home, but he pictures himself falling to his death. And instead, he opts for the subway. And I love the sheepish look on his face right here as he's riding it home. He's embarrassed, ashamed, scared. Clearly, this fungus is having an effect on him. That night, he has a nightmare where he is accosted by his conflicting dual personalities. First, we get this empty Superman costume who insists that his dying just isn't right. He is a legend, and he has to fight this fungi's harmful side effects. But then we get this empty suit and a pair of glasses, kind of representing the Clark Kent side of him. And he takes issue with this invisible Superman statement, tells Clark he is no one special without his powers, and that dying is a natural fact of life, and he should embrace it. I love this back and forth as the costume avatar argues for the legend of Superman, the immortality of what he and the sigil of the House of El represents, and then you have the avatar of Clark Kent aggressively campaigning for kind of shuffling off this mortal coil and finding comfort as you do so. Clark awakens from this nightmare, screaming at them both to stop, and the next morning he finds his powers are still coming in and out, sometimes amplified far beyond their ordinary reach, like when his hearing kind of paralyzes him as he crosses the street, but at the same time later in the day his powers short out again. Realizing that he has few options left, he returns to the Institute for Extraterrestrial Studies as Superman this time, and he borrows the meteorite from Dr. Everett, who gladly loans it to the Man of Steel. He takes it home, and for 20 minutes he scans this rock using his X-ray vision, trying to find some type of antidote. But soon that power fails him too, and knowing that he has been infected, Kal-El understands that he will soon die. The only question that remains now is where. He chooses to go south, and I love the map across the top of the page as we see, all of his friends, Flash, Wonder Woman, Batman, Jimmy Olsen, and we see Supes is doing his best to avoid any city that a member of the superhero community calls home. With the meteorite and shotgun, Clark rents a car under Kal Ellis and heads to the only part of the country without any indigenous superhumans, the South. Heading down to Louisiana, he falls asleep at the wheel, violently wrecks his car. As it crashes, it immediately goes up in flames. He's on fire, delirious and hallucinating. He is in the Scarlet Jungle. He grabs the meteorite and he stumbles through the flames, still on fire, into the swamp where he collapses. And it's here that Swamp Thing finds him. He comes across Clark and wonders why this charged stranger has not died yet, saying he came through the fire like I came through the fire. And I love this emotion we get from Swamp Thing as he tends to Clark. Superman is unconscious at this point and mired deep in these hallucinations where the bones of these extinct creatures of the Scarlet Jungle beckon to Clark, begging him to join them, quote, beneath the shade of these crimson leaves forever.
Hey, I'm freaking out, man. You are freaking out, man.
Meanwhile, Swamp Thing notices that this super familiar looking stranger is holding on to this meteorite, quote, like an ugly child. I freaking love that description. It paints such a vivid picture for more. Noticing the fungus on the space rock, Swamp Thing uses his connection to the green to try and establish contact with it. He quickly realizes that this fungus has an alien origin, and as Superman battles his hallucinations, Swamp Thing opens the tatters of his shirt and he realizes who this is. Superman wakes in a frenzy, tells Swamp Thing to get away, even though it's his delirious visions that he's yelling at, and Supes instinctively burns a hole through Swamp Thing's chest with his heat vision. As he watches Clark, Swamp Thing comes to understand that the most powerful creature on the planet has gone insane.
The snozberries taste like snozberries.
Superman's insanity causes destruction to the swamplands with both his breath and his heat vision. He's raising the tree line with his breath, boiling the water with his eyes, and it soon becomes clear as he burns like a supernova that all of this overexertion will eventually kill him. Desperately, Swamp Thing tries to make contact by linking himself to Superman via the fungus and the green. He appears within Superman's hallucination in the Scarlet Jungle, and at first, the Man of Steel is distrustful and thinks Swamp Thing is one of these ghosts of extinction as he crushes Swamp Thing's hand. As Swampy tries to explain what's happening to him, Superman continues to give in to his rage and his doubt, uppercutting Swamp Thing. He's about to get on top of him and beat him with a bone, as Swamp Thing explains that all of this fighting overexertion are pushing his body beyond its limits. In that moment, Superman quickly realizes that he is succumbing to this illness, and in order to help calm him, Swamp Thing takes his hand and submerges Superman within the, quote, cool darkness of the endless green, extinguishing the inferno inside him as he falls asleep in a beautifully rendered scene at the bottom of the page by Veitch. Superman's fever breaks and Swamp Thing leaves him. When Superman awakes, he checks himself to ensure he is healthy, and as he gets refreshed, we get a unique and super cool use of his powers that John Byrne would also soon co-opt, as Superman refracts his heat vision through the side view mirror of this wrecked car and uses it to shave off his stubble. I just love that scene. It's so dope. It's always stuck with me after I first read it, and to me, those are my favorite comic book moments. The little ones that never leave the mental library. Superman takes off with a meteorite. He's headed back to Metropolis, knowing that the fungus can no longer harm him. He's feeling good, right? But he is none the wiser about how he actually came to be healed. On the contrary, he's thinking to himself, when there was no one there to help me, I'm proud that I overcame it on my own. He's blissfully unaware of Swamp Thing's crucial participation in his full recovery. Man, and meanwhile, as he's flying up, ignorant overhead, down in the swamp, the Avatar of the Green looks on with a smile on his face, and he heads deeper into the swamp. Moore ties it all up in his usual profound and poetic way, with the last line kind of tying into the Scarlet Jungle, saying, quote, upwind, there is a splash as a gator thrashes its tail, nosing out into the deep water. The vine-draped shadows beckon, the ancient trees whisper. Their leaves are a burnished crimson in the first shafts of dawn. Whew, don't get no better than that. I love DC Comics Presents number 85 because it is one of my favorite Superman stories of all time, by my favorite writer, Alan Moore. I love it because it is a story of subverted expectations. It's Superman laid all the way low and done so in such a shocking and foreign manner that you can't help but be intrigued. From the opening bit with the Man of Steel driving a car, heading south to die alone, you're instantly hooked in. And this isn't the Superman that you're used to, who bathed in the heart of the sun. No, this one is mentally unstable, he's feverish, he's suffering from hallucinations and voices in his head. His powers work one minute and they don't the next. And it really isn't until the very end of the issue that Clark seems completely himself. And then we have Swamp Thing's gentle and guiding presence who saves the day without any acknowledgement or recognition. It's such a powerful and potent little tale that doesn't begin or end like you think it will. and it's from one of the best eras for comic books that we ever had. And whether they're working together or separate, if it's Alan Moore or Rick Veitch, sign me up every single time. That's it for me today, gang. As always, I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed our stroll through this amazing one-shot. Also, go check out that Superman Annual number 11 or the collected Moore Superman work. As always, make sure you like the video and are subscribed to the Dr. Doom's Fan Club channel with all them notifications on, folks, so you don't miss out on any more of my great comic book content. As always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Station!
So, I mean, I do get into a character to the point where I sit in front of a mirror and try and imagine what it would feel like to be that character, how their body would feel, whether it would be heavier than mine or lighter than mine, how they'd move. And it's pretty psychotic. I'm glad I work alone, because if anyone could see me while I was working, then I would probably be in one of the jackets that does up at the back by now, you know. But yeah, I sit there in front and I put on a voice. I talk to myself. I probably shouldn't be revealing this in front of an audience. But...